Walk through any German city, town, or village around 7:45 in the morning, and you'll see something considered impossible in the United States. Kids, and I mean kids as young as 7, 8, or 9 years old, heading off to school by themselves, riding their bikes and scooters in the street with brightly colored vests and flags, boarding public buses with their rectangular backpacks, and disembarking trains and streetcars when the light rail gets to a stop outside of their Grundschule. Or just simply walking with their friends, crossing streets, rail lines, and intersections, all without a parent in sight. But meanwhile, in the United States, going to elementary school looks a lot more like this. You're either boarding a school bus that picks you up directly from your driveway, or being dropped off by a parent after waiting in a line that wraps around the block. Now, there are some pretty good reasons for this phenomenon, some more obvious than others, and we'll get into all of that. But outside of the differences in infrastructure, beyond issues of urban planning and transportation, there's something more fundamentally different between this simple everyday routine, and that's the level of independence and freedom that young children experience in Germany versus the United States. Kids here thrive. They're healthier with far lower rates of childhood obesity. They're more active, better at problem solving, and enjoy a level of self-reliance and independence that's fostered by a radically different approach to child development. And it's one that makes their lives safer. So, let's take a look. Over quite a few videos now, we've discussed just how comprehensive public transit and cycling infrastructure is in our region of Germany. And we are incredibly lucky to live in a region of this country where cycling is not only the dominant form of commuting, but because of the extensive network of buses, trains, streetcars, car sharing, and bike sharing, you don't have to own a car to get to work or to run errands. But this infrastructure also comes with a ton of benefits for the littlest ones in our community as well. For starters, because of the reliable network of separated cycling paths, bike lanes, and streets where bicycles actually have priority, cycling itself is not only a reliable method of transportation for parents shuttling their little ones to and from daycare, but also offers opportunities for smaller children to participate as cyclist commuters themselves in a safe environment. And you know, this is fascinating because whereas in the United States, kids will mostly just ride their bike around their neighborhood or honestly probably just down the street to a friend's house, kids here in Germany regularly ride their bicycle from point A to point B to go to school, to run everyday errands just like their parents. And quite honestly, once little ones graduate from a kick bike, they'll first start by cycling on a sidewalk with their parents riding along beside them, before eventually joining the adults on the street riding in bike paths, just again, like their parents. And in order to learn the rules and etiquettes of the road, bicycle safety instruction is also a course that little ones take here in Germany in elementary school. And this has two major benefits, one immediate and one in the long term. In the present sense, not only does this help to foster a sense of independence and self-reliance, but children are learning from a young age on how to be active participants in a much larger bubble than what is typically experienced in the United States. I would argue that a child's world is a lot larger here in Germany than what kids in the United States experience because, again, they're not just biking around their neighborhood, but they're biking around their entire community, learning how to find their way around streets, and again, interacting with adults in more grown-up situations from an earlier age. But the second, more long-term effect is that because kids who bike in everyday traffic are the rule and not the exception, adult drivers in Germany anticipate children being there. They look twice in a bike lane before turning. They drive with greater caution and greater awareness for smaller cyclists because, well, they were once that little kid too. They know what it's like to be a small person in the big world and take greater care of ensuring that safety. But beyond cycling, the infrastructure in Germany is constructed with all ages in mind. Take regional or local trains, for example. From special seating reserved for pregnant, disabled, or elderly riders, to entire sections of the car with fold-up seats so that I can bring a stroller or even a bicycle with a trailer. And these kind of design choices make even long distances possible pretty easy with little ones and relatively safe. But once more, because of the strong network of regional trains, buses, and streetcars, existing public transit in Germany is also the default transit network for kids. And quite frankly, I actually never thought about this until one of Jack's teachers at Kita actually asked me whether or not kids go to school in the yellow school buses that she has always seen in Hollywood movies. So if anybody else who's European who has wondered this, yes, we absolutely do take the traditional yellow school bus in most school districts to and from school every day. But it's one of those culture shocks that is actually more subtle, because one of the things that took me by surprise when I first moved to Germany was that there aren't those yellow school buses. And kids here, if they're going to school, they take public transit just like the adults. That's right, they take S-Bahns, they take regional trains, and sometimes there will be a city bus that has a special operating time where it only displays Schulbus on the front, indicating that they're just shuttling kids from the various pickup points to school. But again, it's still just a normal city bus. Schools here generally don't have their own fleet of buses like they do in the United States because they don't need to. We have a great network of public transit that is safe and reliable. All right, so if you're a parent who's watching this video, I would wager that if your child is anything like mine, they've tested and pushed their boundaries from time to time. And sometimes these boundaries aren't physical boundaries, but they're just trying to see what they can get away with. For example, my son Jack has never eaten a cookie for breakfast in his lifetime, but every single morning, it's like the first thing he asks me when he wakes up is if he can have a cookie for breakfast, which the answer is always no. But sometimes our children also do push to see what their physical and active boundaries are going to be. How far ahead of me is he allowed to ride on his bicycle? How high can he climb the rock wall at our park before I step in? And how fast can he whoosh down the slide headfirst before I tell him to knock it off before he knocks out another front tooth? Which, yes, that's actually happened.
Oh my God.
But something that I've noticed as a parent here in Germany is that German parents tend to have a much larger limit on what they feel is acceptable risk for their children. The first time I went to a playground in Freiburg with Jack, I kind of freaked out a little bit. All the German parents were huddled together drinking coffee, not really paying all that close of attention to their children, who were literally hanging off a circus trapeze ropes course 20 feet above a sand pit. My American brain said, where are all the piles of soft padded foam? The liability notices, the personal injury lawyers. But yeah, you aren't really going to see any of that at a German playground. And parents here generally don't helicopter their little ones like American parents are pretty accustomed to doing. It's all part of their philosophy on how to best rear a child. And essential to that is letting them experience risky situations in careful, age-appropriate situations. Whether it's learning to chop food with knives in kindergarten, climbing a ropes course at their local park, or learning how to light a fire in 2nd grade, or just simply allowing their 7-year-old to walk alone to a bakery down the street, kids here are a lot less monitored like they are in the United States. Contrary to what I think is probably a stereotype about Germans, which is that they're really strict, in my experience, parents here are the opposite of that. They place a much higher value on independence and responsibility. Those parents at the park weren't ignoring their children, they were trusting them. So in a way, Germany doesn't really need a free-range parenting movement because free-range parenting here is already the norm. You know, I started to touch on this a little bit in one of the earlier sections of this video where I talked about how children use and are welcomed in public transit and cycling infrastructure just alongside adults. And it's a normal part of our culture here. But I want to frame that notion in a very specific outcome. And that's that in Germany, all spaces are considered child spaces. In the US, we have a plethora of what are called family restaurants, where it's more socially acceptable to take small children and where they'll likely provide paper placemats with crayons for coloring and entire menus catering to children, mostly consisting of pizza, hamburgers, and chicken fingers. But in Germany, while you can find these, they're rare because the culture here doesn't necessarily have to delineate between a family restaurant and just a normal restaurant. Here in Germany, even the fancier restaurants will still have ergonomic high chairs available for little ones who are visiting. And again, yes, while you can find some restaurants who might have 2 or 3 items on their menu that are more or less catered to children, it's far more likely that the kids are just going to order off the menu like an adult would. You can obviously sometimes ask for a smaller portion, but kids here don't necessarily have to eat child-specific food. Depending on their age, anything is up for grabs. And I think the cumulative effect of all of these things is that by blurring the line between what constitutes a child space and an adult space, children here learn from a younger age on what is appropriate behavior in public situations. And resultantly, traditionally adult environments are better adapted for children and families. So many Black Forest restaurants, beer gardens, and even breweries, yes, breweries, here in our area have play spaces outside. Parents can sit on the terrasse and enjoy a meal or even a freshly tapped beer from the Rothaus Brewery, while their children play in one of the coolest play spaces I have ever seen. Okay, so for this next section, I actually want to switch things up just a little bit and talk about something that has less to do with the kids and a lot more to do with the parents. And that's because one of the things that I hear a lot from my friends and family in the US who have kids is just this discussion about how much of their day is spent essentially just being a taxi driver for their children. Because of all the reasons that we've already talked about in the video, American parents either don't trust because of our culture or can't trust because of logistics or infrastructure that their kids go by themselves to soccer practice, piano lessons, or an after-school activity. Now, don't get me wrong, many parents will tackle this by carpooling with other parents to help share the burden. But the amount of time that Americans spend inside of a vehicle, simply shuttling their little ones from point A to point B every single day, in and out, is a huge physical and mental load that, quite frankly, I don't think we talk enough about. Being a human bus driver on top of your full-time job, on top of cleaning the house, on top of cooking the meals, on top of the responsibility of parenting, ultimately means that parents in America, particularly when their kids are young, often don't have hobbies of their own or very much time for themselves. And listen, I'm not trying to say that there isn't joy found in that activity. I know that for a lot of parents, the time that they spend inside of that vehicle is really one of the few moments they have with their kids to talk to them about their day, to get to know them, to chat with them because they're so busy all of the time. But again, there is a toll that takes on the parent, particularly in terms of just having time for self-fulfillment or to take a moment to address your own mental health and well-being that we just frankly don't talk about. And I think we really should, because consider this. In a given year, it's estimated that 7.5 million adults in the United States with depression have a child under the age of 18 living with them. And also in the US, it's estimated that at least 15 million children live in households with parents who have major or severe depression. And while there are numerous factors which influence the rate of depression, one of the key factors indicated in studies as influencing rates of depression was interpersonal relationships and social connection. And while there haven't been very many international studies on the rates of depression amongst OECD countries, a recent study by the CDC shows that about 1 in 10 women in the US reported symptoms that suggest that they experienced an episode of major depression within just the last year. And mothers who share the larger portion of this parental responsibility do experience higher rates of depression than men. And to be fair, all of these studies simply just show a correlation and not necessarily causation. But in sort of an antidote here, I will say that it's been my experience amongst myself and my other mom friends here in Germany that we still have lives outside of just being a mom or being a parent. And that my friends who have kids still have time in their schedule to do things that bring them a sense of happiness and self-worth that isn't just necessarily tied to being a parent all the time. And in speaking to my American friends, it just doesn't seem like that is as common. I mean, even if it's just an hour to go for a run, read a book, go swimming at the local pool, or play an instrument, it seems like my mom friends here still have time in their schedules to do things that make them happy, independent of their children. And speaking personally here, I can say that when I have time in my schedule to do things that relieve stress, but also bring me a sense of happiness, I find that I'm a better, more attentive, more loving, and more empathetic parent to my children as a result. But I think I do want to shift back just one more time to talk about kids. And in that light, I think we've all probably heard the phrase, "It takes a village to raise a child." But I would argue that here in Germany, they take that phrase one step further in how do we create a village to appropriately raise a child. Here on our channel, we've touched a lot on the different laws, regulations, behaviors, and societal and cultural nuances that make life in Germany collectively different from the life we experienced in the United States. And speaking candidly, I can say that for me as a parent in Germany, one of the things that I've noticed is that there is this collective sense in my community that these laws and regulations and societal norms are there because we wish to create the community we want to see in the world and support everyone in our community as best we can. So yes, crossing the street without a green light at the crosswalk is illegal. Insulting someone with vulgar language is illegal. Not passing a bicyclist with proper space is illegal. But almost more important than the law itself is that there could be a child nearby who witnesses you modeling poor and irresponsible behavior. And as a village, as a community, we all take responsibility to model the behavior we wish to see in the next generation. And I realize this is probably going to sound a little bit absurd, but I actually find myself more trusting in strangers here in Germany than I ever did back in the US. I'm comfortable giving my children greater independence and more opportunities for self-reliance because I trust that there are drivers on the road that are actively watching out for my kids on their bikes. I trust that there are adults around them who are modeling appropriate behavior and kindness. And I trust that they're entering a world where they're welcomed and encouraged to participate. And ultimately, it's because of this trust in strangers that my kids have a greater sense of independence and are ultimately a heck of a lot safer when they enter out into the world. But I'd love to hear from you on what you guys think. Do you think my observations are correct, or is there something else going on? And what is it about your community specifically that lends you to feel like your kids are safer and more independent? Please let me know down in the comment section below. And as always, if you enjoyed what you saw today, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. And for more content from the Black Forest family, hit that subscribe button. So, I'll see you next Sunday. Tschüss!